Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, from wherever you're watching from. We want to welcome you to the International Human Rights Day. We are celebrating this in a scientific way. So wherever you're watching from, joining this conversation, we're coming to you live from Mistil Hotel. And today is not the usual day. Today is this climax of the 16 days of activism against the gender-based violence. It's a conversation you and I have been a part of at the different lanes and different layers. Today, I want to recognize the different entities that are with us. We have the Uganda Human Rights Commission, and of course, we have the Office of the High Commission of the Human Rights here. We have the Embassy of France. We have the United Nations. We have the Uganda Law Society. We have Uganda Police with us. And of course, other stakeholders from the different walks of life are here with us to make sure that we have this conversation. Now, you who is a part of this conversation, from where you're watching from, I want you to be a part of this conversation. And the hashtag is a Human Rights Day 2020. Human Rights Day 2020, that's the hashtag. We'll be in position to tap in a little bit of what you're saying, what your feedback is about this day. So I want to thank those who have participated for the 16 days of activism, but not only just in this period, but the entire year. We have had human rights on the edge. As journalists, we have seen that on the edge. We have seen different players abusing the human rights and coming out and apologize. On the other side, we have seen support from other entities that have supported the fight for human rights. So today, ladies and gentlemen, those in my presence and those online virtually, I welcome you to this conversation. Now, to start off today's conversation, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to welcome Mr. Kamadi Byonabye from the Uganda Human Rights Commission to give us welcoming remarks, and then we can kick off the conversation. Mr. Kamadi.
Thank you very much, Andrew. We expect the Honorable Minister of State for Gender, Labour and Social Development, Honorable Sarah Kanyike. I therefore recognize her in absentia. We are told she will be joining us shortly. Your Excellencies, heads of diplomatic missions in Uganda, present here with us, I can see the resident coordinator and your team, the acting chairperson and members of the Uganda Human Rights Commission, representatives of development partners, heads of partner organizations, and your staff present, our keynote speaker, the president of the Uganda Law Society, with us here, and other panelists. I can see Afande Kasinje on my left here. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to you all. I stand here on behalf of the Secretary of the Uganda Human Rights Commission to welcome you on this very important day in the protection and promotion of human rights, not only here in Uganda, but the entire world at large. 72 years ago, today, somewhere in Paris, in France, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was adopted by the UN General Assembly. I read these things in books of history because that very day I was not in this world. And I guess many of us here, there are very few who are 72 years old today. But we are here to commemorate that landmark achievement, and it has been the basis for all the human rights work we do in the present day world. Like any other thing has a base year, 10th December 1948 remains the base year for universal protection and promotion of human rights. On behalf of the Uganda Human Rights Commission and the partner organizations with whom we have jointly organized this year's commemoration, I warmly welcome all of you to today's event, which is a climax of the commemoration activities in Uganda. This televised public dialogue is one of the activities jointly implemented by the Commission and other partners, including the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, the Equal Opportunities Commission, African Center for Treatment and Rehabilitation of Torture Victims, Human Rights Center Uganda, Uganda Law Society, among others. The activities jointly carried out to commemorate the day included the Human Rights Essay Competition, targeting the youth in universities and tertiary institutions. We will later in this function get to know those who emerged winners in this human rights essay as they will be unveiled. A press conference to launch the commemoration activities, which was held yesterday, and the ongoing media advocacy campaign on the theme of the commemoration. There are ongoing media advocacy campaigns, TV talk shows, sport messages, name it, to popularize the importance of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but most importantly, to take stock of the strides made and how to take the struggle forward. Permit me, therefore, to applaud the organizing team, which comprised of representatives from the Commission, the key partner organizations mentioned above, for their efforts and commitment that has yielded success that we are witnessing today of the successful commemoration events. Ladies and gentlemen, the International Human Rights Day is significant and recognized globally because it is the day that we all come together to commemorate the landmark day when the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was adopted in 1948. If I may pause a bit here, after the UN Charter came into place, 24th October 1945, somewhere in the city of San Francisco in the United States, they formed the Economic and Social Council of the United Nations and tasked it to come up with a project for international protection of human rights. And that was in February 1946. So by 10th December, the day we gather here today, they had come up with this declaration, which, as many know, initially it was not binding. It took the United Nations and the other actors 18 years to get a legally binding international instrument, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, together with the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. And it took another 10 years for these two international conventions to become operational. Those were 28 years after the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So you can see, if this had not been done, it would have taken another 28 years without seriously considering the issue of protection and promotion of human rights globally. The theme for this year's commemoration, which is Building Back Better, putting human rights at the center of COVID-19 recovery, has been selected to guide the discourse in light of the current pandemic. And as we will discuss and hear from our panelists later on, there is a lot of human rights violations globally, not only here in Uganda, under the struggle to combat the COVID-19 pandemic, but this theme seeks to address this as a key issue to ensure that let us combat the pandemic while respecting human rights. Today's dialogue, therefore, will specifically focus on promoting human rights and accountability in the context of general elections and COVID-19. This is a topical issue here at home, and there is no better time to talk about it than today. Allow me, therefore, to welcome and express our gratitude for the keynote speaker and the panelists who have graciously accepted to facilitate at this important dialogue. As we mark this important day, the Commission, which is constitutionally mandated to protect and promote human rights in the country, reaffirms its commitment to fulfilling its various functions. One of the panelists who is going to speak will highlight in greater detail what the Commission has done in as far as addressing issues of human rights within the context of COVID-19 is concerned. Let me end by registering our sincere gratitude to the government of the Republic of Uganda. As we all know, it bears the primary responsibility to protect and promote human rights. The UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Robert, is always with us here. GIZ, the Embassy of France, and other partners for your generous financial support towards this year's commemoration. Finally, on behalf of the organizers of these events and on my own behalf, I wish you fruitful deliberations and wish you all Ugandans a happy Commemoration Day. I thank you for God and my country.
Kamadi, for that well thought through rundown. Online, I've seen a couple of you asking about the human rights, and someone was wondering if we have Uganda police represented. Just so you know, online at Tukiziwe Arnold, we have Mr. Asan Kasinje is here, and he will be deliberating a little later. And then we have other people from the Uganda Human Rights Commission, we have Electoral Commission here with us, and we have Nudipu for purposes of inclusion. So ladies and gentlemen, given that we have heard from Mr. Kamadi, we have a recorded speech. This comes from Mr. Macbeth Forbes, who happens not to be here with us, but he recorded this message on behalf of GIZ, and I request that all of us will focus on the screen and we listen to his message.
Chief Guest Minister of State for Disability and Elderly Affairs, Honourable Sarah Kanyike, the Acting Chairperson of the Ugandan Human Rights Commission, Dr. Amuti, and the members of the Commission, Secretary Directors, Regional Heads and staff of members of the Commission, His Excellency the Ambassador of France, Heads of the diplomatic missions present, Heads and members of the civil society organizations, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. I'm very happy to be here for the first time in my capacity as Country Director of GIZ, addressing key human rights players in Uganda, and on this important and significant day known as the International Human Rights Day. This is a day for us to recognize achievements in respect to promoting and protecting human rights, but it is also a day we need to reflect, ponder, consider, and perhaps review both our individual and collective responsibility when it comes to respecting, protecting, and promoting human rights. This day has been preceded by 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, which I must, unfortunately though, highlight have been prominent, especially in this year, where we registered an alarming increase in violence against women. As such, these days of activism play an important part in raising awareness and, of course, to call for the prevention and elimination of violence against women and girls. We must continue to spread the word, advocate and lobby to ensure proper and sustainable protection of women and girls now and in future. Now, 2020 has been an extremely challenging year on all fronts, but especially with respect to the human rights, and it has been taxing in Uganda, from the recent violence to the COVID-19 pandemic. Discrimination and inequalities have deepened and worsened. We have also seen a lot of tendencies with the potential to jeopardize freedom of expression, assembly, freedom of association, and the press. In line with the national theme, promoting human rights and accountability in the context of general elections and COVID-19, I would like to reiterate three major points for us to ponder on as we proceed with the commemoration of this day, the International Human Rights Day. One, as the COVID cases increase, we need to continue advocating for a rights-based and gender-responsive approach to all COVID-19 related interventions. We must all remain committed to promoting human rights, gender equality and non-discrimination, and of course ethical responses in respect to COVID-19 measures. These principles should be reflected and integrated in all the work we do. Secondly, elections are at the core of a democracy, and the right to vote and fundamental human rights standards must be, of course, guaranteed. As an agency working with civil society, the government, the human rights community and human rights defenders, we are obliged to speak out about violations and to advocate with our partners for a peaceful electoral process. And thirdly, lastly and important, the prolonged absence of a chairperson of the Uganda Human Rights Commission has the potential to jeopardize key achievements made in the protection and promotion of human rights in Uganda. If the watchdog is not fully functional, it might have a negative knock-on effect on the general environment with respect to human rights. I believe that these areas which I just highlighted are not only food for thought for the future discourse, but very much the focus of the topics of our discussions today. I look forward to hearing about the exchanges of today's deliberations, and more specifically to the key outcomes and action points. Finally, I would like to affirm GIZ's commitment to the protection and promotion of human rights with a specific focus on persons who are marginalized most, as we have done so for the last 8 years. So thank you very much for your patience and listening to me, and I wish us all and you a good Human Rights Day 2020. Thank you very much.
I want to thank Mr. Macbeth Forbes from GIZ for that message. And going forward, I suggest that those tweeting, please, the hashtag is Human Rights Day 2020. It's very interesting, the comments coming in from here. There is a lady called Akelo Justin in Leader says that I'm so grateful that I'm part of this day from where I am. I've seen in the electoral process, I am worried for myself and my countrymen, but with this conversation, I'm sure we'll find lasting solutions. And she's happy that you're here. Moving forward, ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome His Excellency Jules Anyabosu, the Ambassador of Embassy of France, to come and give us remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give him a round of applause as we welcome him to address us.
You don't have something to sanitize, no? I too was not born at the time of the proclamation of the Universal Declaration of human rights, but I learned a lot about it, and I know the key role France played and continue playing to promote it. Without being, I was saying that, Maxime, you want me to repeat it, or you? Okay. Yes, I was saying that I know the key role France played and continue playing to promote this declaration, but never been a lecturer or a lesson giver. The representative of police and the UPDF. Representatives of the diplomatic corps, my dear Rosita, glad to see you. Dear Rosa Malongo, UN resident representative, thank you to be part of this event. The representative of the UN agency, I recognize my young brother Maxime, who is country director of UN Women. Antonio is also between us. A very great thanks to Robert Colciani, who is the head of the UN Office for Human Rights. Thank you very much, Robert, for inviting me. The representative of the Ugandan Human Rights Commission, representative of GIZ, the civil society present in this evening. Dear guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. I'm glad to be here today with you and broadcasted on TV for the International Human Rights Day to commemorate the 10th of December in recognition of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. As you all know, France has always been considered to be one of the homelands of human rights, if not the homeland of human rights. As such, in my capacity as ambassador of France to Uganda, you can easily guess how happy my colleagues and I are to renew our partnership with the UN Human Rights Office of the High Commissioner and the Ugandan Human Rights Commission, with now GIZ as a new partner on board in celebrating altogether the 72nd anniversary of the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in Paris on 10th December 1948. Like I said, everybody knows how dear the concept of human rights is to my country, and therefore how important it is for us to put human rights at the core of the COVID-19 recovery, which is the theme of this year's celebration. This pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, has affected all of us, individually and globally, and will unfortunately continue to do so for at least a few more months. Having said so, we think, however, that there are ways to consider this pandemic as an opportunity to build back together and to rethink solidarity. As you may know, the Embassy of France to Uganda, in partnership with Makerere University, the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, UN Women, and the French Institute de Relations Internationales et Stratégiques ARIS of the Kampala Geopolitics Conference. And, for example, one of the topics that has been tackled in how the COVID-19 pandemic should help us reimagine subsidiarity and so solidarity for a better world. I invite you to go to the Kampala Geopolitics website and stream our panels because they can be a great source of inspiration from experts on how the COVID-19 pandemic changed our relationship to leadership, sport, arts, biodiversity, the private sector, of course, etc., etc. COVID-19 taught us that we all face different degrees of vulnerability, but also that we shall never take rights for granted because they always remain fragile. We have all been challenged at different levels by this crisis. Health workers were at the front line, of course, and we shall all be thankful for their dedication. But I also want to thank all of the civil society, organizations, and actors that are closely monitoring human rights and making sure that in such a context, we do not forget to adopt a human rights basis approach to address the crisis. I know that there are in this room some students and young people, I can see them, that have been writing on the impact of COVID-19 in their home and community. I am glad that you have been given the opportunity to express and to articulate your experience within a structured essay because, as you know, we very much cherish critical thinking and freedom of expression in France. This collective thinking contributes as well to responding to the crisis and working towards a better recovery. It is essential for all of us to reflect on the ongoing situation to make sure that we address, first of all, the challenges linked with access to health and social services, but also more specifically as secondary consequences of the crisis topics such as food security, economic vulnerabilities, and refugees' rights. As you also know, this day also marks the end of the UN Women-led 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. Campaign that started on the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women on the 25th of November. Thank you very much. Even you are the young brother, I was very proud of the job you did under the umbrella of all the UN community in this country. So thank you very much. And by thanking you, of course, I also say to Rosa, thank you. Women's rights are always and more than ever at the core of the French diplomacy. With the new concept of feminist diplomacy adopted in 2018 by President Macron and our Minister of Foreign Affairs, and that is a really key concept to implement in France and to develop feminist diplomacy. By this concept, Jean-Yves Le Drian, our Minister of Foreign Affairs, is implementing not a kind of special chance we have to allow to the women, but it's first of all to recognize their talents, their skills, because their way to do things are different from the way the men used to understand and to do things. So that, I'm sure that, no doubt about it, will be a great chance for France, and I expect that France will also, by this way, a kind of example for the other countries all over the world. It is essential, I was saying, for us to advocate against gender-based harmful practices such as forced marriage, teenage pregnancies, or domestic violence. As a former UN Secretary General said, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, once day, violence against women is still a violation of human rights. Violence against women is still a violation of human rights. It is still a crime. It is still unacceptable. Unfortunately, these practices have been on the rise during the pandemic. In France itself, I was saying that there are some core values my country used to share with all over the world, but we are not lecturer, we are not lesson giver, because we, in our own country, need to continue doing progress. In France itself, according to UNICEF, we have known a rise of declared domestic violence by 13% within the 2 first weeks of the lockdown. Of course, our government tackled the issue seriously, took a very strong measure to handle it. It is a process. We continue to work on it. In Uganda, according to Florence Nakiwala, Youth and Children Affairs Minister, at least 2,700 adolescents became pregnant during the first 3 months of the lockdown period. You will recognize that this kind of situation is unacceptable. These facts are far from being isolated, and we need to make sure that the right mechanisms are in place to enforce legislations and policies to protect and empower women and girls everywhere in the world. You also know that France will be hosting, in partnership with Mexico, the UN Women-led Generation Equality Forum in June 2021 to celebrate the 25 years of the Beijing Convention and Platforms for Action. We intend to use this platform to mobilize around women's rights, and we hope to have the opportunity to continue working hand in hand with Uganda on such topics. I would like to take this opportunity to compliment Uganda on its effort for being in the ratification process of the International Labour Convention 190, if you prefer, of 2019 against violence and harassment in the world of work. With the country director of UN Women, I was part with one of our colleagues, the ambassador of Sweden, the Swedish ambassador, Per. I was part of a campaign led by Maxime that we called Men at Work. And to be frank with you, and humbly speaking, I learned a lot. I listened to the thousands of people we met, we interact with. I learned a lot, and at the end of the day, there are some key principles that those we interact with are waiting for. First of all, to respect them and to consider them as human beings. Secondly, to trust them after listening to them. And the last, but not the least, is to take action. We should stop talking. Now we have to take action. And I learned a lot from this campaign. Once again, thank you very much, Maxime, for having implemented it. So. I would like to conclude. I would like to raise another issue. Since I've been living in this country for 16 months now, I would like to raise another issue. I think that together we can work on. Of course, and I talk about the COVID-19 pandemic. Maybe it's the first time in the world that at the same moment, all over the world, individually and collectively, we are all affected by this kind of crisis. That could also be an opportunity, especially about everything linked to education. And I talked to the representative of the government. You can see I represent France. I'm the French ambassador. But I strongly feel myself Africans. So there is something I learn, but also understand. And I'm sure that the education sector, this continent and this country, in which there are very, very, very brilliant young people, have the opportunity to interact with the students, to go to the university, to the school, talk about the Francophonie. These young, they need not help, but they need the tools, the basic tools, to learn, to get education, and after that, we can request from them to not wait, all of them, to become civil servants. They can create, but without skills, without education. I know that this country is doing a lot, but the way I was educated, in Africa, we cannot think that it will be the same way. We will educate the young of this generation, especially in a country like Uganda. So it is a request. I met many times the First Lady who is in charge of education and sport. I know the effort the country is doing, but I request, if it is possible, more and more effort to focus on education, and how to train. Because there are so many talents in this country, they just need the basics to get the right level, and then we adults, we can request for them, okay, don't think that it is to the government to give you everything. The government did the effort to educate you, to skill you. Now you can show that you also can do something for your country, to create for something for you, for your family, and for your country. So that is a request, and I rely on you to convey it. No worry, it's finished. I would like once again to thank the organizer of this event. I was really happy to be part, not because France is at the beginning and still part of the human rights all over the world, but because I think that our common future needs to continue working seriously and respectfully in this kind of issue. And Robert, thank you very much, because I know the job you did. Thank you. Sorry, Mr.
I want to thank His Excellency, Jules, from France. You've given us quite grateful insights, but to the rest of the speakers, I request that if you're called upon, please let's use not more than 7 minutes to be exact. But there is a tweet I would like to read for you. This comes in from a gentleman in Abim district. He says, the day on which United Nations Assembly adopted in 1948 the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, we can take action in our own daily lives to uphold the rights that protect us all and thereby promote the kinship of all human beings. Congratulations, all those who are celebrating this day. Now, without any further ado, allow me welcome from the Office of the High Commission of Human Rights, Mr. Robert Kotachani, to address us. You're welcome, sir.
Your Excellencies, heads and members of national institutions, heads and members of international organizations, dear colleagues from the UN family, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Mine is going to be very simple. I'm going to read to you the statement that the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights has prepared for this occasion. I read, Human Rights Day. Message from the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet. This year's Human Rights Day falls at a time we will never forget. COVID-19 has taken us by storm and shaken our world. A tragedy followed by an extraordinary opportunity to recover better. This Human Rights Day is a call to action. I call for all of us to seize this opportunity and build the world we want. For that, we must accept the lessons from this crisis. One, end discrimination of any kind, like pre-existing conditions that make individuals more fragile. Gaps in respecting human rights have made all of society more vulnerable. If anyone is at risk, everyone is at risk. Discrimination, exclusion, and other human rights violations harm us all. 2, reduce widespread inequalities. Universal social protection, universal health coverage, and other systems for the delivery of fundamental rights are not luxuries. They keep societies standing and can shape a more equitable future. 3, encourage participation, especially from young people. All voices have a right to be heard. 4, increase and intensify our resolve and efforts to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, a concrete agenda for universal human rights. These are not just the right things to do, they are the smart things to do. And there is only one way they can be done, by standing up for human rights. Because human rights yield fair and resilient societies, they are the answer to this human crisis. Like the climate emergency, COVID-19 reminds us that we are bound together as one humanity. We must act. Working together, we can recover better. With strong solidarity, we can build a world that is more resilient, sustainable, and just. Join me in standing up for human rights. And
again, I want to thank Mr. Robert Kotchani for that address from the Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights in Uganda. Again, I want to kindly caution those who are watching us live to please observe the COVID-19 regulations, and those in presence, please make sure that your mask is well worn on all your soft parts, soft spots. COVID is real and COVID kills. Again, I want to emphasize those watching from wherever you're watching from, please practice social distancing. I know it's close to impossible, but do the best you can. Now, coming forward, ladies and gentlemen, there is a tweet again I want to read because this comes exactly before the resident coordinator addresses us. It says, all humans are born free and equal, and this year's Human Rights Day marks the 70th anniversary of Declaration of Human Rights, a milestone that proclaimed inalienable rights to which all are entitled to stand up for your rights. And thank you so much, Uganda, for hosting this conversation. This is Maggie Indigimana following this conversation from Burundi. Now, ladies and gentlemen, with that said, allow me welcome the resident coordinator of the United Nations, Her Excellency Rosa Malango.
Thank you. I saw you almost called me a he there. In the UN, we call Maxime Mr. Madame, so I'll take it for today. Yeah. There we go. That's what I get for calling you Mr. Madame, huh? Okay. So, is it morning or afternoon? There we go. Good afternoon to everyone. Did we have some coffee? Good afternoon, everyone. There we go. We're in the Pearl of Africa. I wanted to begin by kindly asking that we all observe 1 minute of silence for those we've lost to COVID, including family members and health workers. If you can please join me. Thank you very much. I want to thank, first of all, the MC for continuously reminding us all to please follow the SOPs. We are in a very bad stage in terms of COVID transmission. Now, allow me to begin my remarks on behalf of the United Nations system and the Republic of Uganda. To the Honorable Minister of State for Disability and Elderly Affairs, on behalf of the Minister of Gender, Labor, and Social Development, representing the Republic of Uganda, a member of the United Nations since 1962, to His Excellency, the Ambassador of France, one of the founding members of the United Nations since 1945, Her Excellency, Ambassador of Austria, UN member since 1955. The acting chairperson of the Uganda Human Rights Commission, my dear colleagues, members of the United Nations country team, in particular, the country representatives of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, our host today, country representative for UN Women, and the country representative for FAO. To other UN staff and colleagues following online. To the President of the Uganda Law Society, the head of programs GIZ, the ASP Uganda Police Force, representative of the Electoral Commission, Chairperson, National Union of Disabled Persons, members of Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. Allow me to begin my remarks by making reference to a quote from Nelson Mandela. I quote, "To be free is not merely to cast off one's chains, but to live in a way that respects and enhances the freedoms of others." End of quote. I am honored to address you today as we commemorate the Human Rights Day, having just ended 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, and in very difficult circumstances as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. We acknowledge that this Human Rights Day comes as Uganda and the world struggle with the impact of COVID-19. But it also comes at a time that modern slavery has increased, hate speech rages on, online bullying takes its toll, economic opportunities shrink, and Uganda prepares to go for elections. In his Human Rights Day message, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres notes the following: "The COVID-19 pandemic has had a disproportionate impact on vulnerable groups, including frontline workers, people with disabilities, the elderly, women and girls, and minorities." End of quote. In Uganda, the lockdown and the enforcement of other measures to help us curb the spread of COVID-19 led to an increase in human rights violations. This was manifested in significant spikes in violence against women and children, incredible numbers of teenage pregnancies, reports of sexual exploitation, and child marriage. Reports from refugee settlements indicate that gender-based violence increased by 55% during the lockdown and has remained at unacceptably high levels. Physical assault and rape are among the most reported abuses. These startling figures require urgent action. The UN Comprehensive Joint Study on the socioeconomic impact of COVID-19 revealed that these measures had had the strongest impact on small, micro, and medium enterprises. It most likely sent 46% of workers in the informal businesses and 43% in the hospitality industry, 41% in the trading and service industry into poverty and business closure. Most of those at risk, guess whom they were? Women and youth. It was informed by this data that the UN system in Uganda reprogrammed our interventions to focus on these emerging issues. We are grateful to the government of Uganda for the waiver we had during the COVID lockdown, for this allowed us to sustain our critical operations and keep a bridge to the vulnerable during and after the lockdown. Our ongoing operations have also enabled us to bring close to decision makers examples from the field of gaps in the plans being developed to support economic recovery. It is fueled by these kind of experiences from our visits to the field that we have reinforced partnerships with the private sector to address those most at risk of being left behind. I am delighted to note and share with you one such example was the recent joint facility between Stanbic and the United Nations, focusing on SACCOs and village saving groups, connecting them to the formal economy. Ladies and gentlemen, human rights must become the foundation for economic growth, for digital job creation, for investment and access to quality healthcare, for supporting transformational governance. Human rights is about recognizing everyone, regardless of their age, gender, race, religion, ethnicity, or political affiliation. Everyone is a person with the right to life, dignity, safety, and prosperity. Uganda, our host today, is home to between 42 and 45 million people. 56% of these are women. Uganda is also the second youngest nation on this planet. Uganda is also home to the second largest community of refugees in the world. What this means is that every step we take in Uganda's journey towards sustainable prosperity has to create space for women and youth. I am delighted that today we will be recognizing 4 young people, understand, Robert, who participated in an essay competition on how to recover better by putting human rights at the core of the COVID-19 recovery. I'm going to ask my staff member, Michael, at this time, to stand up with the 4 SDG kits that I brought for you with information on the work that we do, including some SDG cups, so those will go to our 4 young winners today. Solutions from the youth on how the country should recover are commendable, and they reflect how young people can contribute to national processes, fostering peace, especially during electoral periods. As the UN, we have worked with the youth to develop our national cooperation strategy for the next 5 years. We have worked with them to launch the 1 Million SDG Solutions Innovation Challenge. We have shared profiles of the top 40 submissions with the development partners. And right now, we are working with the National SDG Secretariat and the Youth SDG Coalition to support a peace messaging campaign during this challenging period. Youth can and they must be part of intergenerational dialogues on issues, the sources of frustrations, our values, and our solutions. At this juncture, I would like to recognize that we are 35 days from presidential parliamentary elections scheduled for 14 January 2021. I must call on all stakeholders to be champions of tolerance, peace, and dialogue. It is unfortunate that recent events in different parts of the country have included physical confrontations that claimed the lives of so many, but was accompanied by incitement, hate speech, and misinformation in political gatherings, on social media, and other social moments. Sustaining peace is a shared responsibility and a common good for all of us. We must avoid a repetition of the recent events, and we must take joint actions such as dialogue and coordination to help sustain an enabling environment going forward. Before I conclude, I would like to use this opportunity to launch the new website of the United Nations Family in Uganda, uganda.un.org. This website is about transparency, awareness, and the transfer of knowledge. is about ensuring that all the people in Uganda can gain a better understanding of what we do, what are our plans, who are our partners, and how do we contribute to bring SDGs to life in this country. I invite you to read our cooperation framework, to read the Rwenzori region investment profiles for 5 key sectors, the socioeconomic impact analysis, and the UN reform milestones, among others. There's also a press corner and media contacts, so please read, share, and engage. My concluding reflection. This year's aspiration to ensure human rights are at the center of the recovery processes from COVID-19 pandemic requires active involvement of all stakeholders, including government, civil society, private sector, cultural institutions, religious leaders, social influencers, among others. We have a shared responsibility to take action informed by universal values. The work of the United Nations is informed by 2 critical instruments: the UN Charter, created when we were established, and the 2030 Agenda and the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. The UN Charter calls on us to save generations from the scourge of war and to reaffirm faith and fundamental human rights. SDG 16 calls on us to promote just, peaceful, and inclusive societies. But ladies and gentlemen, this is also relevant in the African continent. The African Charter on Democracy, Elections, and Governance states as follows. We must emphasize the significance of good governance, popular participation, the rule of law, and human rights. We reaffirm our collective will to work relentlessly to deepen and consolidate the rule of law, peace, security, and development in our countries on the African continent. Last, but definitely not least, the Ugandan 1995 Constitution emphasizes as follows. The exercise and enjoyment of rights and freedoms is inseparable from the performance of duties and obligations. It therefore imposes on all citizens the duty, among others, to promote democracy and the rule of law. End of quote. We can only succeed together. So, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the United Nations and Uganda, I reiterate our commitment to work with all partners through the Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework to support peace, development, and the aspirations of the Constitution, the National Vision, and the SDGs. I wish to recognize the extraordinary partnership between the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, the Uganda Human Rights Commission, the security entities, and civil society, especially during these unprecedented times. To the government of Uganda, I must invite you to kindly expedite the appointment of a new chairperson of the Ugandan Human Rights Commission in order to help reinforce its mandate, its efforts, and national leadership. Human rights provides a framework for us to implement the African philosophy of Ubuntu, so let us implement what is already ours. As I conclude with another quote from Nelson Mandela, it says, "To deny people their human rights is to challenge their very humanity." It is my hope that as we celebrate this International Human Rights Day, we will work together to protect our shared humanity. Thank you for your attention.
Ladies and gentlemen, again, this is my takeaway. The humble plea Her Excellency made to the government, let's give a round of applause to that because it's timely. We need the chairperson of the Uganda Human Rights Commission like yesterday. I want to thank those that are online. She has alluded to something called online bullying. Now on the hashtag, those attacking other colleagues because you have different opinions, you're infringing on their rights. It's okay to have your opinion and it's okay for them to equally have the opinion. So let's just have a great conversation. Without any further ado, allow me to welcome from Uganda Human Rights Commission, Dr. Katebalirwe Amoti, to address us today. But again, I want to emphasize, please wear your mask correctly. And those following the conversation from online, from wherever you are, please practice social distancing. I understand some of you are in remote areas or in crowded areas in the arcades. Please practice these SOPs. The numbers are surging, and we need you alive. Amoti? Come on, let's give him a round of applause as he comes to address us.
Thank you very much, moderator. I think I'm coming here at the very right time to prepare you. Please get ready. In a very few minutes, we will be welcoming the Honorable Minister, who is the chief guest. And so I'm starting from there. Although she hasn't arrived, I will recognize her presence as I observe very respectively all the protocol as has already been observed, and I'm doing this in the interest of time. I will stick to my remarks. On behalf of the organizers of this meeting, on behalf of the Uganda Human Rights Commission, and indeed on my own behalf, I wish to add my voice to that of our Secretary. Let me pause there and allow ourselves to welcome the Honorable Minister of State for Gender. Please welcome her. Honorable Minister, Honorable Sarah Kanyike, you are warmly welcome. I'm just beginning to make my remarks. On behalf of the key organizers of this meeting, on behalf of the Uganda Human Rights Commission, and indeed on my own behalf, I wish to add my voice to the Secretary of our Commission to warmly welcome all of you to this televised public dialogue, and this dialogue at which we are commemorating the International Human Rights Day. To remind you, every December 10th, Uganda joins the rest of the world to commemorate the day because of its significance to all humanity, as the landmark day when the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was adopted. Fortunately, I had already been born in 1948, although I didn't know what was going on in Paris. Certainly, I didn't know what was going on, but I was on this earth. This year, just like all the previous years, the Uganda Human Rights Commission, and as you have already been told, Equal Opportunities Commission, our partner, National Commission of UNESCO Uganda, in partnership with the key civil society organizations, including the African Center for Treatment and Rehabilitation of Torture Victims, African Center for Media Excellence, Human Rights Center Uganda, Penal Reform International, and others, including Uganda Law Society. We have all jointly held a series of commemoration activities over the recent past, which have culminated into this very event which we are holding just now. Permit me, therefore, from the onset, and on behalf of the partners, to add my voice to the previous speakers, to unreservedly thank the committee which has worked tirelessly amidst the current challenges of the pandemic to make the commemorations possible in the way we are holding them successfully. This year's commemoration, as you have already been told, is unprecedented simply because it is taking place during a time when the entire globe, and indeed our own country, Uganda, is experiencing serious challenges arising from the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. The current pandemic has inevitably exacerbated the incidence of human rights violations among communities globally, but also specifically in Uganda. The commemoration theme, therefore, which is building back better, putting human rights at the center of the COVID-19 recovery. This theme is indeed very appropriate at this time. Today's commemoration, therefore, offers an opportunity for the Commission and our partners as key human rights defenders in this country to raise our voices through synergies in the advocacy, calling for respect and observance of human rights and freedoms by duty bearers who are largely comprised of government, and fulfillment of duties and responsibilities. And I'm very grateful to you, UN coordinator, for stressing this point, especially in the quote that you made. Fulfillment of duties and responsibilities by rights holders who are mainly the citizens as they enjoy their rights. The televised public dialogue focusing on the theme promoting human rights and accountability in the context of general elections and COVID-19 has brought together key stakeholders to dialogue on the measures required to ensure a free, fair, credible, and the pandemic, and an opportunity to share strategies on how to build back better during recovery from the pandemic. On behalf of the Commission and our partners who have organized this event, permit me in a special way to thank the keynote speaker and the panelists who have graciously accepted our invitation to share with us, and indeed the whole country, their thoughts, and for accepting to lead the way to unpack the topic of discussion for today. The Commission and our partners are optimistic that going forward, this dialogue will ultimately generate strategies for improved observance of human rights in our country, Uganda. I therefore urge all of us to utilize today's engagement by actively participating and holding candid, constructive discussions. While our Commission and our partners, the human rights defenders, continue to advocate for the respect and observance of human rights by all concerned parties, especially during the ongoing electoral process, and at the same time call for the continued observance of COVID-19 guidelines in place in order to avoid the spread of coronavirus. We also today reaffirm our commitment to the respect, protection and promotion of human rights, and human rights for all the people. And in accordance with Uganda's National Constitution of 1995 and other binding regional, that is African, East African, and international human rights instruments. On our part, as the National Human Rights Institution of Uganda, the Commission pledges to continue fulfilling our constitutional mandate through interventions such as holding periodic dialogue with relevant stakeholders, making recommendations on the human rights situation through published reports and human rights advisories, issuing periodic press statements as we did yesterday, receiving and investigating complaints of human rights violations, holding tribunal hearings to offer redress to victims of human rights violations, and delivering continuous civic education and awareness programs, among other human rights interventions. Permit me to recognize and thank the government of Uganda and all our development partners for the unwavering support that you have provided to the Commission and to our partners for this year, particularly for these celebrations. We specifically acknowledge the financial support received from the government of Uganda, the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights in Uganda, led by my brother here, Robert, GIZ, and the Embassy of France in Uganda, which support has enabled us to hold this year's commemoration activities. And to all of you, I say a big thank you. In conclusion, allow me to remind ourselves, and indeed the entire country, that the fight for the full realization of human rights and freedoms certainly is not an event. It is a protracted journey requiring concerted efforts by all of us. I therefore, on behalf of the organizing partners, urge members of the general public to play your part by making your contribution to the improvement of the state of human rights and freedoms in Uganda. I'm doing this deliberately. General public, everybody play your part. Don't leave it to a few institutions and government. We therefore today reiterate the call for all of us to observe the cardinal principle that human rights go hand in hand with duties and responsibilities. Hence, the need for each one of us to fulfill our constitutional duties and responsibilities, and the UN coordinator has rightly referred to them in the Constitution of Uganda. We observe them as we enjoy our rights and freedoms. We wish all Ugandans happy commemoration events and urge all of us to use this Human Rights Commemoration Day for reflection and recommitment to the respect and observance of human rights, even amidst the pandemic and the ongoing electioneering period. I have said all this, ladies and gentlemen, for God and my country, Uganda. Thank you very much.
Again, I want to thank Amoti for that thoughtful speech you've given. Amoti, on different platforms we have met He has kept on emphasizing rights, rights. At every flare we meet, he keeps saying, Andrew, rights, rights, rights. I want to thank you for that, Amoti. Again, ladies and gentlemen, together with me in a special way, allow me that we welcome Honorable Sarah Kanyike, the Minister of State for Disability and Elderly Affairs from the Ministry of Labor, Gender and Social Development. You're so much welcome, Honorable. And going forward, those online, I want to thank you for the conversation. Let's keep it going. But again, I emphasize, please follow the SOPs as per the Ministry of Health, the guidelines. A couple of you in here, I can see your masks. They're just under your nose. Please make sure just look at your neighbor. Just take a look at your neighbor. Is the mask covering the nose down up to the chin? Please take a look at your neighbor. Take a look at your neighbor. Okay, you're doing it for us and you're doing it for me. Thank you so much. Now, going forward, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to welcome from the Uganda Law Society, Miss Fiona Wall Nabasa. This happens to be the president of the Uganda Law Society. Affirmative action for women. More round of applause, ladies and gentlemen.
Our chief guest, the Honorable Sarah Kanyike, the Honorable Minister of State for Disability and Elderly Affairs, Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development, His Excellency, the Ambassador, His Excellency Jules Anyambusu, the UN Resident Commissioner, Your Excellency Rosa Malango, the representative of GIZ, Mr. Robert Kochani, the country representative of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Mr. Antonio Querido, the country representative, Food and Agriculture Organization, Mr. Hunatu from UN Women, the country representative, the head of the Austrian Development Corporation, Rosvita Kremza, oh yes, Uganda Police Force, Mr. Asan Kasinje, the Electoral Commission, Mr. Richard Babo Kamjisha. We also have a representative from Nudipu, Uganda Defense Forces. I don't know whether the brigadier is present. Our host in the house, he's present? Oh, okay, sorry. Yes. Our host in the house, Dr. Kateba Lire Amoti Wairumba, our acting chairperson of the Uganda Human Rights Commission, Commissioner Patricia Achan, representative of the principal judge, members of the commission present, dignitaries present and online. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm very excited today because it seems like everybody that matters in human rights seems to be here right now. And it's such a singular honor and very humbling for me to stand before you and give a keynote. I want to thank the previous speakers because I feel like they've said it all, and the passion of Your Excellency, Dr. Rosa, and also our Ambassador of France. I think that passion is really amazing. Hearing the history and passion with which our host, the Commissioner, speaks, for me, I think creates such a good basis for this conversation. I bring warm greetings from the Uganda Law Society, both the membership and the council. We're very excited about this day because the Uganda Law Society is only 64 years old. It's a little younger than the Declaration of Human Rights. And for a long time, one of our pillars has been to promote the rule of law. But we are also advisors to government and the public on issues that affect human rights. This is also a very good period for us because we've just celebrated our Pro Bono Day where lawyers come out and give free legal services. I call it putting on our superhero suits for the indigent, and I'm glad that we were able to do this despite the COVID conditions. And want to thank our partners, the DGF. I did not recognize my partner, the head of the DGF. I think let's give them a big hand clap. They do a lot of work for us. And one of the things that for me speaks is that most of the cases that you get on the Pro Bono Day are about human rights. They're not just commercial issues or things like that. And this is also a special period for us because as the Uganda Law Society, we've been celebrating 16 days of activism. I think it's also a beautiful period that I know people don't like me mentioning this, but it's a miracle that the Uganda Law Society has a top-tier female-led council for the very first time in 64 years. So our law firms, for the first time, are making SGBV a conversation, and we've been having conversations and making recommendations on issues to do with gender-based violence, but especially sexual harassment in the workplace. And I think this is a very relevant conversation for the day, given what Her Excellency presented when it comes to sexual harassment, the pregnancies we saw in COVID, the defilement cases, the issues of sexual harassment in schools. That's very serious. I think you're a very appropriate chief guest for today because these are the things that are plaguing our country as we think about human rights. Today is the 71st anniversary of the International Human Rights Day, and it was also the anniversary of the birth of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the Charter in 1948. However, as a history buff, I was excited to see His Excellency, the Ambassador here, talking about the role of France in all this. And I remember Maximilien Robespierre talking about liberté, égalité, and fraternité. I don't know whether that's the correct pronunciation. And for me, looking at the French Revolution and where they were coming from, and then seeing this madness that happened around the revolution turn into people trying to make sure that we do not resolve things with violence again, that we avoid driving people to the peak of desperation by actually respecting liberty, the right to associate, fraternity, and equality. I think for me that's the basis of human rights, and that was in 1790. I don't know how many decades ago that was. So His Excellency should keep taking more credit. This year, the United Nations has set the theme for Human Rights Day as Recover Better. Stand up for human rights. My boss always says it's better, how you finish is more important than how you start. And we go into leadership positions, we go into new election years, we go into new periods of work and contract periods with so many aspirations. We entered COVID and we were lost for words. We did not know where to start. But it is very important that we finish well. We've lost so many people, and Her Excellency, I thank you so much for that moment of silence, because in this moment, I also want to remember a great champion of human rights, our deceased chairman, Uganda Human Rights Commission, Alhaji Medi Sozi Kagwa. So we remember today with pain the loss of our loved ones during this year. We've had COVID-19, we've had election violence, and we've had many other reasons that these people are not here with us. I will also take this moment to remind every leader, everybody that is campaigning in this period, to remember that it is your duty, first, before you even get their votes, to ensure that the people you're speaking to are secure. So inform them and make sure that they respect the SOPs, even when they gather to listen to you. I think that our responsibility as human beings and as leaders should start with us making sure that even as we campaign, people are safe. I'm one of the strongest proponents on the mentality that we don't need a statute to justify our rights. There are things that nobody should question about you. That when you walk into a room, nobody should say, oh, because you're a young person, you do not deserve this role. I think we need to look at these things. But these things are not obvious to us today. These rights are inherent, but they're not obvious. Our cultures, our traditions have always suppressed the right to express oneself. Growing up, I smile a lot, but I remember growing up, it's a cultural thing. My mother would say, close your mouth, don't smile too much. It's not feminine to do that. I'm not here to write a feminist agenda, but I believe that in trying to hold ourselves in, we have promoted cultures and civilizations that actually suppress human rights. We need to open our minds. We need to let people be. And I'm not advocating for chaos. I am very structured and I love the law. But there should be equality and access to justice, even within this. The Human Rights Commission has been our epicenter established by the Constitution of Uganda for ensuring that every victim of a human rights violation is assisted as per their constitutional mandate. We thank them for the great work that they've been doing, and today we take this opportunity. I want to add my call to the UN representatives' call. We need a chairman. I'd like us to give a big hand clap to the Commission for all the work they've been doing for the past year without a chairman. I have it on good notice that there's a lot of cases that cannot be heard right now because of quorum issues, because the tribunal is not able to sit. This is causing a backlog for the Human Rights Commission. And when you think about the cases that go to the Human Rights Commission, these are life and death cases. Justice delayed in this case is not only justice denied, but I cannot even imagine the impact that this is having. But this is also causing another problem. I want to thank our member from the judiciary, and we want to thank the judiciary for being innovative. However, we need to realize that if the Human Rights Commission is not sitting, these people are also going back to the courts, which already have an insurmountable amount of backlog. We need to ensure that our president and the government appoint a chairman as quickly as possible. As the Uganda Law Society, we've also taken it upon ourselves to write to His Excellency, and we hope that this will be listened to. I applaud the Commission again for their work. I applaud every development partner here, because your efforts, and our police, the Uganda Police, the UPDF, give them a hand clap, everybody. Your efforts underscore how human rights are of value in themselves and should never be instrumentalized, and that they are also essential to advancing peace and human dignity, empowering women and girls and the vulnerable, deepening development, and sparking hope. We applaud the essay competition I've just heard about, because we believe the respect for human rights has to start in infancy for a human being. The Uganda Law Society has, since 2016, been involved in establishing over 100 rule of law clubs in schools, right from primary, secondary, and university level. This is because when we hand that young child a constitution and we teach them about the evils of corruption, and we teach them about human rights, and we teach them about sexual harassment, we are equipping them. Because even when daddy does something wrong, this child will question you. I love the innocence and the bluntness of children. Children bring out the best and reflect sometimes the worst in us. And I'm glad that today we are also recognizing young people and their role in this struggle. I'm proud to say that the Uganda Law Society has also established the University Law Students Association that we support for mentorship. This Law Students Association also supports students in primary schools, and we've been having a debate competition, a rule of law, a moot competition that have caused serious conversations about things like sexual harassment in schools to become topical issues for young people. We are trying to now make civil rights a topical issue for young people. Honorable Minister, I'm so excited that you're here because I've always been pained that the study of civics as a subject was removed from the P5, Primary 5 curriculum. I do hope that can be returned, because raising people that do not understand what an emblem is, what the nation that they're talking about is about, then we cannot say anything about patriotism. Human rights, enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, as I said, belong to everybody. Therefore, prevention of these rights is a responsibility of everybody. Every measure to uphold human rights, as we've had, helps ease tensions, delivers sustainable development, and sustains peace. Every day we sit at big tables in big offices and we say that we are talking about sustainability, development, and peace on the continent. We cannot do these things without protecting human rights. Human rights and COVID. I believe that COVID has presented a huge mirror that has made us interrogate ourselves, interrogate our policies, interrogate our ability and readiness to face crisis as a united people. COVID is hitting everybody, man and woman alike. It's so interesting that I remember when I first heard about COVID, I thought of leaving the country because I was thinking our hospitals are so not prepared for this. I was thinking the access to medical health in this country is not going to allow, we're going to just drop by the dozens. So I want to thank the government of Uganda for their efforts, because I think we're one of the countries that's not doing very badly when it comes to infections. Let's give the government a hand clap. I know that they are a pet punching bag a lot, but today let's give credit where it's due. Again, with this test, we've seen that even developing countries have suffered greatly with COVID. It's not discriminating anybody. And because of that, this is the first time that as a united continent, not continent, Earth, planet Earth, has to get together as a people and look at how are we protecting our people? How are we increasing access to medical services? How are we going to make sure that and this is to the development partners, the government, how are we making sure that every human being gets this vaccine? Because there's issues now, there's questions. There are people who are saying this is not a vaccine, the source is questionable. They're saying all these things. Then others are saying this is a vaccine for the rich, for the privileged, for the VVVVIPs. So how do we change? And this is going to be the test. Anybody who says they stand for human rights and has the resources needs to first prioritize this issue. As we fight for this COVID, we've heard about what we call the shadow pandemic. COVID-19 has, again, been a mirror. I remember at the beginning, we had, as we were reacting and responding, there are so many human rights violations that came out that were quite special during this time. We had a quick action by government, especially in Uganda, and we applaud them for this, to come up with legislation, to come up with regulations. We had a quick response from the forces, and we thank them for this. But that quick response also came with an overzealousness. And this overzealousness resulted in serious human rights violations. I remember in Gulu we had about 300 women that had been found selling food on the streets, and they were herded and taken away. And a magistrate had them asked them for 100,000 shillings bail, each of them. And about 200 of them had to go back to jail because they could not afford that. I want to thank the DPP, the newly appointed DPP, because when I gave her a phone call, she was very quick to make sure that these women were released. Let's give her a big hand clap. But for me, this spoke to the need for us to manage zealousness and rule of law and human rights. We have to balance these balls. We can't drop any one of them. Several reports have indicated a drastic rise in cases of sexual, gender-based violence. I will not repeat what Her Excellency said, but just to give you a number, about 3,000 girls during COVID in Central Region alone in Uganda were discovered pregnant between the ages of 13 and 15 during the 3 months between March and May. March, April, May, yes. And now for me, what this says is that there's so many more who are probably defiled. It's just those that were found pregnant. There's so many more who probably tried to abort and probably died doing it. But the question for me that is very painful was who was abusing these girls? There was a lockdown. There's no movement. It is the people that are supposed to protect these girls. Our chief guest, I know that you've been suffering with the issue of shelters, and I think we should clap for UN Women and the ministry, because I hear these are being revived right now. But how are you going to shelter a girl whose father is defiling her? For how long are you going to do that? How long are you going to even get the evidence? Because I'm told that by the time and want to thank the development partners and the judiciary for the SGBV sessions. By the time these sessions begin, you find that the victim is now the wife of the perpetrator, because while we were taking long in our investigations, the families negotiated. So for me, COVID raised issues in our society that need to be addressed. COVID raised, we saw an inequitable application because we had to have elections, right? We saw an inequitable application of election regulations. We've seen some people standing up and campaigning, and they're okay. We've seen others even try to assemble, and the reprisal is just insurmountable. So the right to assemble, the right to campaign for the candidates, the right to free speech. We saw a lot of lack of information. As we speak, there are people who get COVID, and because they're scared of stigma, they're still working, they're still going to office. And they've tested maybe, and they know. But because of poverty and other issues, because of also what the lockdown did to us, they're still working and hiding the fact. And this is partly contributing to because we are not informing people, we're not educating people enough about the dangers of COVID, about how it's okay to be a person that has COVID and recover and still go into society. We have seen, during COVID, we saw our offices closed down, serious unemployment. We saw a lack of protection for those that lost their jobs. We saw the government getting relief, financial relief for SMEs and small businesses that were struggling, with prioritization of certain industries like agriculture. Our chief guest, again, we've still not seen this money reach these people. I was in a forum recently where the small business owners who have applied still have not received this money. Which month is this? So if your business was closing, I met a farmer who 1,500 recoveries. The officials, of course, will confirm these numbers. But without checking everybody, we cannot be sure of the numbers. Without educating people, we cannot be sure that we are actually preventing further infection. In some countries, resources and efforts have even been diverted from violence against women responses and other things that used to be priorities in the area of human rights to COVID-19 relief. So the shadow pandemic is that resources are being diverted away from just immunizing children, helping people with HIV, to dealing with COVID. It can be justified, but I also think that in a country like Uganda, where our Ministry of Health budget is, I think, 3%, we could do much better. I think this is the year that we should take it to 5% and reduce some of the other priorities. Number 3 on our budget is paying interest on loans. This is the time we should be asking our development partners and the countries that we've been borrowing money from to give us some relief so that we can reprioritize our budget to deal with our existing circumstances. In lieu of the looming shadow pandemic and what it's doing, the need for access to justice during COVID was dealt with in a very interesting manner. When the lockdown came, the lawyers and the courts were not seen as essential services. So that froze for a bit, and then the courts were opened and the lawyers were still not essential. So we made noise and we got 30 stickers, and we made some more noise, and I'm glad that we saw an evolving, at least we need to applaud the government that they kept listening. So whenever I would make noise, something would happen. But what happened during that time is that the prisons were overflowing because there were additional arrests of people that are breaking COVID SOPs, but there were no lawyers to reach them. Up to now, we're still having some challenges reaching our prisoners. We had video conferencing and so many other innovations, like let's recommend and commend the judiciary and prisons for making sure that some serious rulings came out during this time. Let's give them a big hand clap. But we saw disjointedness in our planning. And I think that this is a place that we should take as a learning place. I was speaking to Mr. Kochani today, and we're talking about the necessity of having all the players, all the justice players, all the development partners on a table quarterly to look at how we're planning. I do not know why we have a budget that is decided without all these people on the table, because we represent different sections of Uganda, and we cannot make decisions in silos. And this is a message to our government. We have the largest parliament in so many places and a large cabinet. And we applaud the level of representation and decentralization. But is it being effective? As we speak, our Honorable Minister, we have the Sexual Offences Bill that we need passed by the Parliament, hopefully before elections. Without this Sexual Offences Bill, we're not going to be able to register offenders. We have teachers that defile children in this school, move to another school, move to another school. These are things only that bill can solve. Sexual harassment in the workplace, right now, according to our laws, only happens to women. That's a huge injustice. The Sexual Offences Bill is the only legislation that actually recognizes what is happening to the boy child and to the man. We have issues to deal with access to justice. The legal aid bill is sitting in Parliament. It's very disappointing that we keep being told that we need, in order to have it passed, we need to remove the financial implication on government. This is a fundamental right. That's within our constitution, the right to representation. The fact that our indigent do not have this service provided as a serious government responsibility is a problem. Madam, our chairperson, our guest of honor, we also have the Human Rights Defenders Bill. Yesterday we were also doing something like this again. We need this bill passed. Human rights defenders are not being given the place that they need to participate and be a partner to government in leading to development, increasing access to justice, raising issues and shining the light where the light of justice needs to be shone. We cannot develop our mineral resources without increased accountability. We should be benchmarking with countries like Botswana that have done it right. And Botswana, one of the secrets that Botswana had was involving everybody that had a voice in the planning. So, election violence has given a new face to this whole human rights issue during this time. We saw civilians who seemed very, very prepared to go violent. John F. Kennedy said, "The rights of every man are diminished when the rights of one man are threatened." We saw one person incarcerated, and as all hell broke loose, forgive my language, all over the country. But also the response by our forces was excessive, seeing live bullets shot into the public. I do not know what happened to, what are they called, dummy bullets? Are they rubber bullets? Rubber. And maybe I'll be educated by the forces on this one. And we hope that today we shall hear something that is being done to those officers who are pointing guns at civilians and letting loose. So in light of the foregoing, it's therefore incumbent upon all of us as stakeholders to implement national and international human rights provisions using the power, influence, and resources that we've been given. Creating ways for citizens to seek help for breach of their rights is also our core duty. As the Uganda Law Society, we've established helplines, but we also realize our defenders, our lawyers, need their own helpline because of their special needs. I know that the Uganda Human Rights Commission has serious helplines. And now I want to applaud Dr. Rosa for the UN website on Uganda. I felt special. Let's give that a hand clap. We need to disseminate information. The fourth estate, I know bad news sells, but as the Uganda Law Society would like to see a partnership on ensuring that every single Ugandan gets the message that they need to vote, gets the message that they need to protect themselves, gets the message that their life comes first. Let us remain alive to the danger we pose when we do not respect human rights. Nelson Mandela, a great human rights activist, a great champion of peace, started out as a terrorist. Yeah. And he said, when a man is denied the right to life, to a life he believes in, he has no choice but to become an outlaw. Let's not do this. I'm not in any way justifying it. I'm just saying that we need to do this together. As part of we do applaud, sorry, just a second. The law enforcement agencies, we want to thank you. We've seen the discipline they usually, we've been told that Uganda has a very disciplined force. We need to see this discipline during this time. We know that you have a difficult task ahead of you. And all of us here actually uphold the rule of law. And we shall keep imploring. You had the chairman who spoke to the general public and said, let's obey the rule of law. Let's resolve our disputes through the law. But we need our security agencies to protect human lives and prioritize the aspirations of Ugandans that are reflected in our constitution as you carry out your job. We thank our partners for all these efforts that have been done. I thank the Uganda Human Rights for inviting me. Malcolm X said, we will never be recognized as citizens until we are first recognized as humans. Today, let us think about our policies and the work we're doing as we work towards treating those we serve as humans. Karl Marx, somebody I disagree with a lot, said, "It is not the consciousness of men that determines their being. On the contrary, their social being determines their conscience." Development, SDGs, all our aspirations as a people will never be realized in countries that do not value human rights. For God and my country.
Thank you, Your Excellency. All lawyers online who were applauding you, President, I want to thank you as well. And those who are here again, let's emphasize the COVID-19 regulations and make sure that your mask is up and make sure that you're safe. Look at your neighbor and tell your neighbor that save me, save you. Come on, look at your neighbor, say, wear it well for me. That's how we're doing. And those watching online, you do the same thing to your neighbor, wherever you are, make sure that the masks are on. So ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, it's 4:13 p.m. and we are still live on TV. I want to invite my panel, but these are the ground rules for the panel. We're going to be precise and concise, and we drive the points home as and when you're requested to. Let me start off by inviting from the Uganda Police Force, ASP Mr. Hassan Kasinje. A round of applause for him. Mr. Hassan Kasinje. AIGP Hassan Kasinje. You're so much welcome, sir. From the Electoral Commission, let's welcome Mr. Richard Babu Kamgisha. Mr. Richard Babu Kamgisha from the Electoral Commission. And from the Uganda Human Rights Commission, let's invite Miss Ida Nachiganda. Round of applause for them, ladies and gentlemen, as they come. And from Nodipu, we're going to have Miss Deborah Lute. This comes in from Nodipu, and they're going to be part of this very conversation. Richard Babu Kamgisha from the Electoral Commission is here. Miss Ida Nachiganda and Miss Deborah Lute will be coming. Can I have an extra microphone? I'll need an extra microphone. Please note that from Nodipo, Miss Deborah, you'll hear what she'll be saying from the interpreter on this side. For purposes of inclusion, this is our forum today, and this is our panel. We're going to discuss how best can we recover. Those following this conversation from TV and from home, our theme today is Recover Better. From where you stand, what could be the best way to recover better as Ugandans? The hashtag is Human Rights Day 2020. I'll be in position to tap a little bit of that a little later. Now, from the Electoral Commission, we had a change there. We have Mr. Kugonza Enoch, Principal Legal Officer. Round of applause to the Principal Legal Officer. I am very excited that you're here with Uganda Police. The conversation is going to be very interesting. Now, to start off, let me start off with Mr. Hassan Kasinje, AIGP. Hassan Kasinje. The role of the police in promoting the observance of human rights during the ongoing electoral process in the context of COVID-19. First of all, we have covered story. I have seen you, Mr. Kasinje, leading a team that went to the kingdom, that went to the church to apologize for extreme usage of force. And I've seen you on different platforms again, amplifying the same message that we all need to stay calm. But on the flip side of it, you said we are all human beings. In that context, Mr. Kasinje, how is the Uganda police promoting the observance of human rights during this electoral process in the work of COVID-19? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrew, the Honorable Minister, and all of you, Your Excellencies, and all of us. First of all, I want to congratulate all Ugandans on this very, very important day, which we celebrate the International Human Rights Day. It's all of us who have life. This day is very, very important for us. I think we start from there. And second, to thank you so much for inviting me, Dr. Katewarirwe, the first lecturer at Makerere University to lecture to me in 1986 in political education. political economy. First and foremost, the role of the police is very, very clear under Article 212 of the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda. We have two issues here, COVID-19, enforcement of SOPs, but we also have our role and responsibility in ensuring that Ugandans enjoy their freedom, their human rights. Our role, therefore, remains protection of life and property, which is very, very important as far as rights are concerned, to ensure that we prevent crime, because, you know, crime in its entirety targets individuals, targets people, and whenever crime is committed, a lot of rights are taken away from people. Murder, robbery, and all that. But we also are involved in detection of crime, prevention of preservation of law and order, and also working hand in hand with other people. Our role, therefore, when we do all that, goes a long way in ensuring that the rights of people are protected and defended. However, we also have a role that we play in ensuring that COVID-19 SOPs are observed. The Uganda Police Force, because most of the time we keep on saying we are doing this, and they think sometimes we come to a forum like that to defend our actions and that kind of thing. But Andrew, I want to say, number one, that all the police officers you see that we have been trained by the Uganda Human Rights Commission, have been trained by us. Everyone who is recruited in the Uganda Police Force is trained in issues that we are discussing today. But next to that, we have come up with, number one, a COVID-19 pandemic guidelines. These guidelines, every police officer has this in his or her pocket. And I want to point out some few issues. They're very quick. I will not delay much. Some of these issues are about the legal and human rights that police officers must observe. For example, we tell them that during enforcement of COVID-19 directives, they must observe the following. Number one, that all our actions are within the law. All actions must be within the law. Number two, that police officers must keep discipline and enforce the law professionally. And I heard somebody talk about discipline. We are disciplined officers. So we must be able to keep the discipline. The other one is making sure that we observe human rights of all persons involved at all times during this problem, this pandemic that we have had. And we have 4 approaches. These approaches are, number one, engagement. Andrew, you remember when we started in March, enforcing the lockdown. You saw our officers. Some of them used sticks, and I think there were women who lost, who were beaten in Kampala and that kind of thing. We regret that. But we immediately had to act in order to negate what had happened. And one of the things that we did was to take officers who were not respecting their rights back for training. We did that. The CDF, for example, apologized to the nation and even called the women that were involved and engaged them. Now, one of the things that we did was to engagement, was to engage officers to engage members of the public and try to tell them that this is a very serious pandemic. Members who are seated here, you remember that we went a long way and procured megaphones. And we had our officers going to the communities. I'm talking about things that you saw on social media. Going to communities, going to residences, going to shops, telling people, please, this is a very serious problem and we must avoid it. The other one is explanation. encouraging people to comply with government directives, and then, of course, enforcement. And I know that there could have been issues during our enforcement. You will realize that this was a new problem. This is a novel problem that we did not even have trained for it. But I can tell you, Andrew, that by this time, I can assure you that we're enforcing curfew, and people understand why we enforce the curfew. And there is no problem at all. And I think Uganda Police has done this well.
Afande, before you proceed, what are some of the challenges as the Uganda Police faced from the public while enforcing these regulations? I'm grateful that you took them for training, because that was my worry and my concern. But now that they went for training, where are we failing the police as citizens with regards to rights?
I think one of the challenges that we face as police officers are people to think that the police officers are there, number one, to curtail their rights.
That's how it looks.
Okay? Yes, I'm coming. And that is the motivation that we have. I think the challenge is people not being able to realize that we are in a pandemic. And this pandemic is not about me, a police officer. It's about my life as a citizen of the Republic of Uganda. It's about my family. It's about my community. It's about it's about all of us. So I think the challenge here is the police officer enforcing regulations against people who think that, first of all, even COVID-19 does not exist. We have people who have said that.
Yes, there are some of those.
Important people in our society, including pastors, who have said, no, this is common flu. And people believe that. And now a police officer is going to enforce these regulations against, on the backdrop of people who think it is not there. Number two, these regulations have been put in place to curtail the political space. I think the government is fearing to have, rallies and all that, and therefore, this is a ploy. But we have seen, for me, I believe, this is individual, it is not scientific, but it's me, Kasinje. I believe we are seeing a spiral of COVID-19 cases when we started this. And I think there's somebody who said, I think it is Fiona. Fiona made a very good statement, that everybody who is involved, be a political leader, go out on your space and tell people that COVID-19 is real. And I think that's where we meet the biggest problem, the biggest challenge that we have.
Okay. Thank you so much. That is AIGP, Asen Kasinje. You've made it much more clear. We'll come back a little later to you because police has a lot of issues going on. But of course, as we proceed with this conversation, please feel free to ask any question. I'll sample those a little later. Going to the Uganda Human Rights Commission, Ms. Ida Nachiganda. An assessment of the current state of human rights in the country during the electoral process in the context of COVID-19. What does the Uganda Human Rights Commission make of the entire situation?
Thank you very much. And
kindly press the button there. Perfect.
Okay. Thank you very much, our honorable chief guest, the Minister of State for persons with disability and the elderly. Allow me to also recognize the protocol in the interest of time. There is a close nexus between elections and human rights. The observance of human rights is important in achieving a free and fair election. It is through enjoying our rights that we're able to actively and effectively take part in an electoral process. So some of the key human rights that facilitate a peaceful, free and fair election include the obvious one, which is the right to vote, freedom of association, freedom of expression, assembly and speech, the freedom of the media, freedom from discrimination, and the right to equality of all before the law. And so we've seen that the violation of human rights affects the fairness of an electoral process. And most times during an electoral process, some of the rights that are prone to being violated during an election include the right to freedom from torture. We've seen the violation of the right to life, especially during the most recent riots that we had in November. The right to freedom of expression, the right to personal liberty, especially where people have been arrested and detained beyond 48 hours, and people have been arrested and denied access to members of their families and to legal representation. However, one thing, we have general elections slated for January 2021, and they are going to be held in the prevailing circumstances of COVID-19, the pandemic that is currently ravaging the country. And we've seen that in this context, all candidates and actors in the electoral process, including their supporters, are required to adhere to the SOPs and the guidelines as set by Ministry of Health and the Electoral Commission, which include the use of the face mask, social distancing, and convening gatherings of 200 people. As a result of these guidelines issued for the electoral process, the enjoyment of several human rights has been limited. However, we need to emphasize, and these rights include the freedom of assembly, freedom of movement. The limitation on the enjoyment of these rights is being enforced in line with the Constitution under Article 43 that provides that rights can be limited for purposes of ensuring public health through preventing the further spread of COVID-19 infections. However, these limitations should be demonstrably justifiable in a democratic society. Firstly, they should be provided for by the law, and we saw regulations being passed during the lockdown, and they must meet a legitimate aim, and for this, the legitimate aim was for purposes of public health, and they must be absolutely necessary. However, the guidelines have been flouted during the campaigns, and efforts to ensure adherence to the guidelines by the law enforcement and security agencies have led to clashes between law enforcement agencies and the political candidates and the civilian population. The clashes have ultimately resulted into human rights violations through loss of lives, people suffering grave injuries, and people losing their property. And I would like to stress, as the President Law Society stated, that in this context, it is important that candidates, their supporters, and the general public strictly observe the COVID-19 guidelines currently in place in order to stop the further spread of the disease. It is also important that the candidates lead by example by guiding their supporters to desist from acts of violence or from breaching the standard operating procedure.
Ms. Ida, I really love your submission. From where you stand as Uganda Human Rights Commission, do you feel the candidates have done enough to sensitize and create awareness to their masses, to their electorates? Have they done that enough to your satisfaction as Uganda Human Rights? Because at the end of the day, it's them who are going to come and they will say that my rights were trampled upon while in the field canvassing for votes. Do you, from where you stand as Uganda Human Rights Commission, do you feel the candidates have played a key role to create awareness of the pandemic where we are today?
We've seen that some of the candidates have complied with the SOPs and have gone ahead to caution their supporters to comply with the SOPs. And then on the other hand, we have seen large gatherings, large crowds campaigning the old style that people are used to. And of course, this causes worry, especially right now as we are seeing that the pandemic is at its peak in terms of infections, in terms of the numbers of deaths. So we are really urging the candidates to rein in on their supporters in terms of preventing the large gatherings, because the large gatherings are a recipe for a disaster. Yes.
And you hinted about something to do with the right to freedom of movement, and we had a scenario where one Robert Chagulanyi was not allowed to go into the next district by Uganda police. Uganda police spokesperson said the hotels and all that, they were all booked out. From where you stand, where do we draw the line between the rights and the exercising of them in the wake of COVID-19? Because police would say it was time for curfew, and the candidate says I need to move to the other district if there are no accommodation where I am. So how best can candidates navigate that kind of where police says, according to the new regulations of the COVID-19 regulations, together with the law and the schedule of the candidates on the other side?
The right freedom of movement, like all other rights under Article 43, is subject to limitation, can be limited. And however, what is important is that the limitation, like I said, has to be demonstrably justifiable. So if Honorable Chagulanyi was prevented from moving to his next destination, there are key things there that have to be probed. Was he supposed to be there where he was supposed to be going? What was the response of the police in the event that he wanted to move? There are very many factors that you have to take into consideration. But also what is important is that the candidates developed schedules, which schedules were shared with the Electoral Commission and agreed upon. So in the event that a particular candidate is facing challenges in moving from one place to another, it is important that that candidate engages the complaint mechanisms that have been set up for that purpose.
Okay.
And the obvious one right here is Electoral Commission, where the candidates agreed and sat down and agreed on the schedules of movement and the schedules of their campaign venues.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ida. I'll get back to you later. Now, going to Electoral Commission. Good to have you, Council. I understand these are trying moments. I'm sure your team is getting ready for next year, petitions after petitions and all that. But from Electoral Commission, we would like to know, as Ugandans where we are, what's the role of EC in ensuring enjoyment of human rights during the electoral process in these unprecedented times? How best can we strike that balance that someone will go and canvass for votes? I, Andrew, will stand and listen to what he says without infringing or flouting the COVID-19 regulations.
Well, thank you very much, Andrew, moderator. I also wish to associate myself with the earlier colleagues who are congratulating everyone, nationally and internationally, upon this anniversary of human rights, of respect to human rights. To your question, the role of Electoral Commission. The article, I will not mention the articles for the sake of our listeners. I will argue, I will explain generally that the Constitution has, among other duties that the Commission is enjoined with, is to conduct, as indeed the two speakers and their excellencies, as well as the keynote address mentioned, to conduct a credible, including the acting chairperson of the Commission. The Commission here being Human Rights Commission. Our main duty is, our main responsibility is of ensuring credible, free and fair election for all, but with the hallmark of equality, and then inclusiveness has been part and parcel. Key in our operations is there is what we call the SIGs, special interest groups, the women, the youth, and that category. The PWDs, our law has about 21 now of categories of people who are whether physical, sensory, and all that. So we have a hallmark of ensuring that there is equality in that. So that's why you see that even before the lockdown, the Commission, Electoral Commission this time, permit me when I say Commission, in my case I would refer to, with due respect, Electoral Commission, had started the process of, we were about to conduct election of these special interest groups cutting across, and there are many cutting across the country. That's when the country was locked down. But after the easing of the lockdown, as we realize you'll see that we've again given them that priority, and those elections have gone out of the way. But of course, the law requires, the law that we are talking about, the Constitution, the electoral laws, and generally the laws that we are expected to respect, whether national or international. We are living in a global village, require respect for human rights, and that when doing that, ensuring we ensure that in carrying out these guidelines are made out. We make out guidelines under this to make it easy for all our people. Not everybody will understand and appreciate the law the way it is written in a highly professional way, so we call it professional way. But then we then come out with guidelines like the AIGP here was saying, and my sister this side, we come up with guidelines so that it is homely. It is homely for our people. So these guidelines that have been put in place tend to ensure that the civil rights, the keynote address talked about civics, that civics used to be part and parcel of our curriculum. And she was wondering what happened. In some of these courses, it comes up, like for instance, those who have done law, and that indeed he talked about a course that his lecturer he has made here. A few of those courses have that bit of civics, but what about the rest? Why can't that come about? So we do partner with human rights and all these to ensure that these guidelines are in place. When the pandemic came in, the standard operating procedures guided by World Health Organization, Ministry of Health, and indeed, as my sister articulately put it, the number of regulations that came up. We then had to pick them and have tended to apply them along that way.
I really want to thank EC for these. But let me just bring you fast forward. After all these were released, on nomination day, we had two candidates. This was on the western side of the exit of the Chambogo University, 200 meters from the nomination area. Candidates were being harassed by security operatives who had no tag names. But they were saying that they were being arrested because we're not following the regulations. EC came out 2 weeks later to condemn the act with these regulations in place, and the time frame taken by EC to come forward and condemn these acts. Does it still run in the faith of human rights from your perspective as counsel?
No, let me just correct something here, that it wasn't 2 weeks. Actually, the day after that, the Lord Chair of the Commission made a statement. Remember that for those of us who are inside the venue, it was a place that had been cordoned off. Reaching it, you had to have taken those accreditation. But not only that, but I want to link it with our theme here, the standard operating procedures. You had to have taken, yes, government indeed and ourselves, ensured that all those presidential 11 or so candidates, the 10 people had to be invited, including all of ourselves who are there, to ensure that we were COVID-free at that point. So whoever wasn't there, for that matter, maybe had that issue. But going back to your question, the chairperson actually gave that condemnation immediately. Those of us who were inside, we didn't know. we didn't know the fracas that was happening. But then I think the spokesperson of the police made an explanation of what exactly happened, and that the formal, what you are saying came as our statement, I think it was the formal one that came out that could have taken longer, could be regretted. But immediately, a statement was made a day after that.
Another quick one. I've had the EC chairperson resound on this on different media platforms, that after you vote, go home. Stay at home and wait for the results. In the same wave, the Electoral Commission has said each candidate is entitled to 2 agents at every polling station to follow the SOPs of COVID-19 as per the Minister of Health. Candidates have gone around the nation and they're still saying the same thing. After you vote, stay at the polling station and wait until your vote is counted. As EC where you stand, how best are you going to enforce the rhetoric you're running?
The guideline is clear. You have already mentioned that you have to have at least two agents or observers. Remember, we have accredited international as well as national observers, all of whom would be in addition to the two other people. And this is for good sake, really, when we have this pandemic still around us, when the politician, and that's why one of the key speakers was saying that if you are a leader, you are the political leader, you are the candidate, we technically call them candidates, you are the candidate and you are seeking for votes. Set a good example. If you tell people that there's no COVID, then what would you expect? If you come and you are not wearing a mask, you are sending a message, okay? You are sending a message. So we will constantly keep, asking people to, to follow the guidelines. We will expect the agents to be there, and we'll also expect the national and international observers to be part and parcel. And then we have all our polling assistants, presiding officers, and the law talks about a constable. There is a constable who is there to ensure that there is orderliness. And that would be an cordoned off place. There should be peace.
Okay, let's hope that will happen. Thank you so much, Council. Moving forward to Nodipo, please note that Deborah you're going to be hearing Deborah's voice on the other side from the interpreter. Deborah, from Nodipo, where you stand, what are the strides in the realization and challenges in promotion of human rights for PWDs in the electoral process in the context of the current pandemic?
Honor different dignitaries. Because of time, I request first to remove my mask. I want to remind you, Andrew, why I'm removing this mask. Our languages got through the facial expression. Please just allow me to remove my mask.
Please carry on.
Yes, I want to appreciate this International Day for Human Rights, and also for remembering persons with disabilities, and most of it to put us in the panel. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Hope all of us in our different capacities will copy what the Commission has done today. Yes, this topic of human rights, it's freedom for all people. I can see people standing, you protect, you promote, and you protect all people. What does it say? Even persons with disabilities are included in people. In this COVID time, it brought us a very big challenge, especially here in Uganda. It caught us unprepared as Ugandans. Remember when we saw the things of SOPs, we thought it was inclusive, saying you put on a masks. But now look at how will I communicate if I'm putting on a mask? They are talking of social distance, but remember, a blind person is going to be held by somebody. How is that person going to move? So we want to say that we need to be consulted as persons with disabilities. NUDIPU is always there, ready for any consultation, giving any support, any issues, in order for us to contribute to the national development for all emerging situations. You see what COVID has done? Okay, I want to talk on two things, COVID, then after that, I will also want to talk about the electoral process. We all know the challenge is security. Army is here, police is here. You've all heard about what happened during COVID time. In Agago district, some deaf man was walking. They were calling, LD was talking to him, but he could not hear. So what ended up was he was shot. At the end of it, they amputated him. Remember, this person is deaf already. Then again, he's given another physical disability. See, this is just one example, but there are many that we have gotten as Nudipu, and there are many which we have not been documented. We have gotten at least maybe 4 cases which have been taken to court, which is still in the process in the court. We also have another case in Kole district. It happened the same. This boy, again, this man was again deaf. He was also beaten to the extent that at the end of it, when he was taken to hospital, he died. So it needs a long time and it's a long process. Programming, training, and inducting security organs on issues of disability. Yes, you can be training them widely in other things, but they don't know about disability. Like, for example, me as Deborah, when I walk around here, will you get to know that I'm deaf? When I'm mentally sick and that time I've not been switched off my brain, will you get to know that I'm really mentally sick? So there are some situations that security organs should always be psychologically, they should also be psychologically analyzing. That if I've called this person and this person has not shown any sign, what could be the problem? Prompt, but don't act quickly to violate this person's right. That is one thing. Yes, I agree with all the presenters. GBV, sexual gender violence. During COVID time, it has alarmed more. But persons with disability, it's very silent because they are voiceless. A deaf person, a woman with a mental sickness, children with intellectual disability, they are quietly suffering and they are quietly being raped because sometimes they stay at home from Monday. Remember, from March up to that time when it was very, very hard for persons with disabilities. And mostly also, these are persons who have to go and look for what to eat. So the interventions in the GBV must be added also and put in these SOPs. It should be specifically, and it shouldn't be alone for persons with disability or for general, but we should put it inclusive. You've seen in the papers, you've seen in social media how people were committing suicide. Why was it so? Because of stress, mental stress. It also increased during time of COVID. So we need to see how we sensitize these people to minimize such situations, to help people live in such a situation of COVID.
Coming to you, Deborah, does this allude that there was no inclusion from the security agencies or the powers that be that architectured the SOPs? From where you stand as Nudipu, do you feel there was no inclusion of the PWDs?
When Ministry of Health developed SOPs, we were not consulted. Then we saw the gaps, time for implementation. Then we said that please always consult organizations of persons with disabilities. Ask us what is best for us, what is our need. It is us who know our needs. So is that okay? Can I go to the area of elections?
Yes, please.
Briefly,
Elections.
in the election process, yes, I appreciate the government of Uganda. It has good policies, political participation of persons with disabilities, Local Government Act, Constitution of Uganda, Parliamentary Act, all are very good. But my request and my recommendation, now as you see the situation of campaigns, all our candidates are moving, but they don't move with interpreters. Are we persons, how are we getting this information to make us decide which is the best candidate? How possible can EC enforce such provisions, access to information for everybody? In the next elections process, please remember how accessible should the elections be for persons with disabilities. When persons with disabilities come to vote, can they be given affirmative action to go in instead of standing for a long time? That is one. Or is there any other way? Also remember that we also read Braille materials. We need Braille materials. There are blind people who can do voting themselves. How sure are you telling that I should move, the blind person should move with a guide? How sure is that this guide is going to take a person I want? That is what I want to forward to the Electoral Commission.
Thank you so much. I'll pass this to Council. I really want to thank Deborah for articulating these issues. The question of inclusion and consultation. EC, what happened?
Actually, from what I've gathered from her communication, she seemed to be applauding us. She seemed to be applauding us, except that
maybe I read it wrongly, because she applauded you in execution, and that's when they came up and they started to say, EC, these were not followed. We were not included. There was no inclusion when these SOPs were coming up. And in your guidelines, you didn't make it mandatory for the candidates that while they're traversing the country, they should have sign language experts next time.
I had to have, Mr. Moderator had to have a beginning point. Yes, that I could see that from her point, she was appreciative of so far the little, if I may call it, that EC has taken, the inclusion that and the laws, because these laws come in place from the, we among other stakeholders, we generate the reforms and we follow them all through the Attorney General to Parliament and all that. She's basically talking about further affirmative action, because there is already affirmative action, and she's talking about the need to have maybe Braille. She has mentioned that, and that she's saying we have guide. We already have a guide who probably is even paid, and I would say that's another appreciation. But then the criticism out of that is that, how sure are you that this guide, okay, right now, of course, we are equally taking note, but you follow the law as is per now, and then you make the reforms. So she has talked about the guide, and the guide is, in most cases, you pick your guide, and then he is facilitated alongside alongside the principal, okay? I mean the person with the disability. But then this is, again, that would be the question of honesty. As for Braille and all this, let it be included in the law, and let a budget be made such that all these others that would help them are put in place.
Okay, thank you, EC. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me relieve AIGP Hassan Kasinje as we welcome Brigadier General Felix Kulaije from the UPDF forces to equally give us a context to what is currently happening. Let's welcome General, Brigadier General. Please welcome. I understand he was held up with official work and a traffic jam to these three, but we believe better late than never. Afande, from where you stand, how do you assess government's preparedness for the electoral process in context of COVID-19 as UPDF?
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, Mr. Chairman, fellow panelists, ladies and gentlemen. My apologies for being late, but I did inform professor that had been called for a meeting, but I would make sure I come. First and foremost, I would like to start with a quote from the Bible. Because God gave us divine commands, and one of the first one is love. Because for you to respect rights of others, you must love them. So I start with a quote from Matthew, chapter 22, where Jesus is saying, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with your entire mind. This is the greatest and first commandment. And the second is like it, you shall love your neighbor as you love yourself." Because if you love yourself, it means you love the other person as you love yourself. So you must respect their rights, you must respect their interests, you must protect them. Now, how is government prepared? From the military perspective, the first baseline, the basic infrastructure is stability. If people are running for their dear lives, you can't talk about elections. If people are not sure about seeing the sun rise the following day, you can't talk about democracy. So the first and the foremost thing you do is ensure stability. And so, following our constitutional provision, the national objectives, we are instructed to ensure national unity and stability. And everybody must promote a culture of cooperation, understanding, tolerance, and respect for each other. The tendency I've seen is for some political actors to think that as long as I've joined the political race, I am above the law. Far from it. Actually, the political actor should be the biggest promoter of law obedience, of obeying the law, of abiding with the provisions of the law. Because once you set the precedence, once you set the pace, then your supporters will follow you.
I totally agree. General, just a brief one. Just in the recent past, we had very regrettable scenes here in Kampala and around the country. And I saw the UPDF coming in as a support structure under the security agencies, cooperation, the joint operations. From where we stand, I understand the army came out and condemned the acts that were done by some errant soldiers and all. But in the wake of COVID-19 and the curfew, especially the curfew, we had an incident in Agago where one was shot and his leg was amputated. Is our UPDF ready mentally, psychologically to engage the public in this work, especially the LDUs that fall under the UPDF? Thank you.
Well, since you have asked specifically about COVID-19, every human being's life matters. Two, it's also the responsibility of each one of us to protect our lives, first and foremost. But it's a primary responsibility of the state to ensure that your life and property are protected. Three, it's also an obligation for both law enforcement agencies and individual citizens to respect the law. Once each one of us does their part, you don't expect crashes to happen. But because there is that devil, then we must have the law enforcement agencies to ensure that each one of us respect the other's freedoms and rights. Four, in the event that you have deployed security actors, despite the briefing, there are those that will become errant. I hope all of us are aware that in the book of Job, chapter 1, verse 6, it is stated that when God's children were assembled, even Satan was there. So if he can enter heaven, it means he can enter human beings' hearts.
So how do we avoid that Satan to be among us now?
So how you avoid, one is the briefing, two is supervision, but three, in the event of an error, then the person is taken to book. Four, you do what we in the military call the AAR, after action review. Where did we go wrong? what did we do right? And if we went wrong, how do we correct this mistake? And so, if you may have noticed, we did withdraw the LDUs, took them back for training, and have been very key in teaching almost all of them that were involved in the operations.
Well done, General, well done.
And we do emphasize what the character of the UPDF is, a people's military. That's why we chose the name, the Uganda People's Defense Forces. So anybody who does contrary to that character must be taken to book.
Let's talk about the excessive use of force.
Can I complete this point, sir? So it's regrettable that individuals err. But that's why we have law enforcement. That's why we have the courts. That's why even in the church or the mosques, these errors happen. The bottom line, how do you deal with these errant personnel? Secondly, is this the modus operandi of the EPDF? And the answer is no. Our modus operandi has been historically known that we respect people's lives, but we also pray that our superiors, the political actors, respect the law. That's how we shall all engage and enjoy the democracy of our country.
Thank you, General. Because of time, allow me, it's exactly 3 minutes past 5 p.m. I would like to let go of the online team, the online viewers. You've been such a remarkable audience. But please keep your questions coming with the hashtag Human Rights 2020, Human Rights Day 2020. We'll be capturing those a little later. Now, allow me right now to welcome my colleague, Kamadi, who is going to take us into the plenary. There are very many questions that could possibly be among us, and they could not be exhausted by me or by the panel here. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Mr. Kamadi to take us in the next session of the plenary. Thank you.